Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of a woman called Julia Rawson, and this was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any of you guys suggesting any cases to me, and of course if you have any more, please do let me know. Julia Rawson was a very talented woman. She was an artist, a musician, and she was just able to play music as she heard it, basically. Even her art was shown at local art shows, so you know, she was really good at what she did, and she was just very creative. She was very much a person who was outgoing, who was very confident as well, and loved to make friends, and very easily did. She'd go over and talk to anyone. It wouldn't be an issue for her whatsoever. Like a random stranger, she would just go over and have a chat with them. She liked to grow her own things as well, like fruit and vegetables, and have the process and just do it all from like scratch and be able to enjoy what she had grown herself. Now, Julia was actually in a relationship with a woman called Elaine, and they dated in the past on and off for a very long time. At the time of this occurring, I've seen two different things as to whether they were still together or not. But either way, they were still the best of friends and still had a really strong, relationship together, whether it was friendship or intimate. Julia lived in the West Midlands in Dudley in the UK, and she was, well, initially her and Elaine owned like a stall for pagan artifacts and things like that, and they sold that. But recently, they had actually bought like a full building together, where they were gonna do the same thing. They were gonna sell spiritual and ghostly things like that. They were really excited about this because it had not long since been open. So a lot of her friends, Julia's friends, actually described her as being a ray of sunshine. And yes, she would make friends everywhere she went, but now that there was a problem with that, because that would also mean that she would potentially meet the wrong kind of people and make friends with the wrong kind of people. And sadly, that is what happened to Julia. It didn't really take her much to trust someone. She would immediately let her guard down and let them in, and she didn't see a problem with that. So it's really sad because she found out the worst way possible that not everyone can be trusted and not everyone is a decent and nice human being, despite you wanting them to be. This case didn't even happen that long ago, so now we're going to go back to the 11th of May in 2019, and Julia spent the day with Elaine. They had a grand old time, and then Elaine decided that she was tired, she wanted to go to bed, but Julia was very fun-loving, was very out there. She led not a chaotic life, but like, so for example, during her paintings and stuff, her friends would go around and they'd always see her covered in paint, do you know what I mean? That's just the kind of person that she was. That was messy chaos, and it was how she lived, and she loved it. So she wanted to go out. It was too early. She didn't want to end the night there. So they parted ways, and then she decided to catch the bus to go to Birmingham, where she could meet some friends and carry on the night. But she actually caught the wrong bus, and the bus she caught ended up taking her back home to Dudley. And despite catching the wrong bus and thinking, oh well, maybe I should go home now, she still didn't want the night to end, and so she decided that she was going to go to one of their local pubs and have a few drinks there. This pub was called the Bottle and Cork. And she's seen going in on CCTV. She sat at the bar, she chats with a man who was in the, and she chats with him for quite a long time. Julia did prefer women. That's who she was mainly attracted to, but she was known to flirt with men. Like I said, she was very outgoing and would talk to anyone anyway. You can see her drinking, chatting away to this man, and then a bit later, I can't really see his face, but they're playfully chatting away. She's pointing to things. He's obviously talking to her about his tattoos, because at some point he rolls up his sleeves and he shows her them on both arms, and she looks like she's just having a great time. On the footage, to me personally at least, it looks like she's quite drunk at that point, and this man wasn't really drunk at all by the looks of it. But when last call kind of comes through, they end up leaving together. So they obviously got on really well chatting, and they end up getting into a taxi outside of the bar, which is also caught on footage. And that is the last time that Julia was ever seen alive again, because after that, she goes missing. Now, his house was just an 8-minute journey away. And what Julia would find in his house probably shocked her to the core, but we will get more into that in a little bit. Because she was quite close with everyone, you know, her disappearance was noticed pretty quickly. Everyone was wondering where she was. People were out looking for her. And it was like 3 days later when she was officially reported as missing, which was the 14th, by a friend. Now, I'm not sure whether that friend was Elaine or not. And like I said, if they were partners at that point, it would have said girlfriend. Or if they'd split up, maybe that's why it said friend. Or maybe it wasn't Elaine at all. I'm not entirely sure. So the police launched their investigation straight away. They began looking for Julia. And they speak to Elaine, who says that she spent the day with her that day and hasn't seen her since, kind of thing. And they end up looking at all these footage, and they catch her getting on the bus to, well, and it ends up in Dudley, obviously the wrong bus. They end up capturing her, following that down and capturing her going into the pub. And so they get the pub footage, and they see her in there having a great time talking to these guys, and then singling in on that one man. And like I said, they're following the CCTV, and they follow it to the point where she leaves with that man, and then that is it. So what they do is they take stills from that video of his face, which it's not really that clear, and of his tattoos, because obviously he has them in like his forearm, like this area, I guess, on both arms, and they're quite distinctive tattoos. So, you know, they put that out there. She's been missing for days. We really need to find her. This gentleman is suspected to be the last person to at least speak to her. You know, they want to talk to him, and so they put all of that out there. But nobody really comes forward to say that they know him. Julia's friends are shown, you know, this man, and they don't know who he is either. And it's like 11 days before they get some new information on this case, because a more security guard actually rings up the police. This was on the 22nd, and he basically says that, I'm pretty sure the guy you're looking for is right in front of me, just on the street having a fag. So anyway, the police go out, obviously, they rush over there, and they spot the guy in question. On the footage, he would have cut off his hair so that he didn't get recognised. I mean, come on, guy. You didn't actually do that, though, did you? Something like that to say is very inappropriate anyway. The police didn't have any evidence that Julia was alive either, because she'd not used a phone, she'd not accessed her bank, so there was no proof of life. They really needed to find her, and they were pretty much convinced that this was the guy that was on that footage that was last known to be talking to Julia. And they knew at that point that they were most likely now looking for, sadly, a deceased Julia rather than an alive Julia. I mean, they could have kidnapped her and held her somewhere. You know, that would be, you'd hope more for that, like you're going to find her alive. But they were inching more along the lines of, you know, she was probably no longer alive, sadly. Or at the very least, she was in like major trouble. So they arrested Nathan, and they also arrested David because the pair lived together, they were out together, and so, you know, potentially they did whatever to Julia together. Basically, he said that he gave a false alibi for Nathan straight away. He said that they were in bed together the entire night of the May 11th, which was a load of horse crap because he was caught on CCTV talking to her. So, yeah. And then because of that, because they had this evidence on the CCTV to prove that that was not the case, he said that he was in bed with him pretty much most of the night, but then later on he might have gone out. Who knows? Investigators decided to search the house, and when they went inside, boy did they get a shock, because Nathan was a true crime fanatic, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right guys? Please tell me that there's nothing wrong with that, because what are we doing here if there is? But, you know, and he was really into horror films, which, again, who isn't? I love horror films. They're bloody brilliant. However, I am not a murderer. So, yeah, and I would never try and reenact any of what I see or have seen on anyone else or anything else. So that is the difference, I guess, between us and people like Nathan. Because, yeah, he did. He had books on things like cannibalism, awful things. He had, I don't know, just weird books. Lots of weird books. He had Chucky head dolls all around the room. And obviously, if you're a fan of them films and you want to purchase things like that, that is totally fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you know, I guess when people walk into a flat like that, it's a bit creepy and a bit unnerving. Nathan, at one point, it was found out that he had taken a forensics course as well because he was really interested in all that. He had lots of books revolving around serial killers, and he was just obsessed with everything and anything related to horror movies, true crime, all of that. But just not in a good way at all. They also found like these disturbing, creeping masks of, I guess he tried to make his own little horror flicks, and he'd made masks and they were around the house as well because he was a student in theatre, and so, you know, he kept them all and just laid them out in his apartment. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a hobby or an interest or being really involved in that. That's why we're all here. But there's a line that must never be crossed. And when you start to make the connections between Nathan's fantasies and what he actually did in real life, that is what is very disturbing. So despite him taking all these courses and stuff, you would have thought maybe he would have been more forensically aware about committing said crimes because, you know, I don't know. These guys were pretty done with it all, to be honest, which obviously we want in these cases. We want them to all be solved. We want them to be caught, whoever did these things. Of course we do. But you know what I mean? Just like, very questionable what they did, like after and stuff. So they had all this stuff. They was gathering up the evidence. So one of the detectives also noticed that in the flat it looked like the carpet had recently been replaced. So they pull that up. Eagle-eyed detective, like, I don't know how he noticed it, because I guess a lot of people would keep the carpets really clean, but can you keep them as clean as to make them look brand new? I don't actually know. Anyway, he noticed. He pulls it up, but they hadn't actually changed the underlay. They found this big brownish reddish stain, and that was sent off for testing, and when it actually came back, sadly, it did belong to Julia. It was Julia's blood. And I guess that, compared to the whole chaotic, tattered mess of the flat, just a big comparison in it, really. That's probably how they noticed it. They went into the records and had a look into, you know, their financials and stuff like that. They found that they had actually ordered a carpet on the 13th of May, which was 2 days after Julia had gone missing. They also found bloodstains on the floorboards. At that point, they knew that Julia had not left that apartment alive. They then followed, well, no, firstly, actually, Nathan David's mum came forward to say that they could check her house for any evidence with relation to any of this because the boys actually had come around to her house and used this burn pit, like a burn bin, to burn some stuff not long after this all happened. So they go around, they look in it, and they find a piece of like garment or clothing or something like that. They take that and it has blood in it, also Julia's blood. So they were getting rid of the evidence, their clothes or whatever of that. Then after that is when they try to follow the CCTV, because the thing is, so now they know they're looking for Julia's body, but where he lived was right by a canal. It was right by all this wasteland, forest. There was residential areas. It was a minefield, really, to the point where they could have hidden her body pretty much anywhere. And so they didn't really know where to start. And obviously they did start, they looked and they searched, but they just didn't have any luck because she could have been anywhere and they didn't know where. They also found out, by following the CCTV again, that on the 16th of May, Nathan, with the help of a friend, I don't think it was David, I think it was a friend that didn't have a clue what was going on, helped him to take the carpet and a sofa to the dump. And there's clear footage of them getting rid of this too. The police went to the dump. they luckily managed to get these out, and once more they found that they were both covered in Julia's blood. That friend also said that Nathan that day was totally normal, and lots of other people around them have said he was acting completely normal. Nobody would know that anything had ever happened, basically. And then this is when eventually, like I said, they're trying to find Julia's body all up until this point. But a witness actually came forward to say that they had remembered seeing two men acting strange and shifty with all of these bags in their hand in this sort of wasteland area. And they thought it was weird, and so they rang the police and told them that. They found CCTV of the men walking up the canal with these big heavy bags in their hands. And then much later on, they found them walking back without the bags. They asked them what these bags were, why did they have the bags, but they couldn't answer that. Having searched the canal and stuff, they were mainly looking around that area, they redirected. They decided to go to where this man had seen them. And slowly but surely, they sadly find a gruesome discovery of Julia's remains. Their search for her lasted 47 days. And then they discovered 2 separate bags in the wasteland containing parts of Julia. They were approximately 20 meters away from each other and were wrapped in this black material. They were wrapped so tightly that the scent dogs couldn't even find them. I believe one of them wasn't wrapped as good as the others, and so that is how they finally found them. But they weren't attracting any flies or anything like that because they were wrapped that tightly. They weren't leaving any smell behind. But because it took so long to find her, her body was in a bad state. It was very decomposed, and sadly they couldn't actually find her cause of death. But obviously they now had a body, and they could fully charge them with, or at least going to charge them with murder. They were already thinking that these guys did something, and they hadn't even found Julia's body at that point. They were already going to looking to charge them with murder, which is quite rare because normally a lot of people say there's no body, there's no crime, and they were going to going after them without the body. But once they found the body and they had all this stack of evidence, obviously it was just, they couldn't really deny it, even though they did. They said it weren't them still. Initially, his first story, let me tell you this because it just blows my mind. It really does. So he took her back to his apartment, okay? Yeah, they were having some drinks, and straight away, she hits on him. She tries it on with him, right? He gets mad in a fit of rage. He gets a rolling pin and he smacks her over the head. She's bleeding. He realizes that she is dead. And so, what does he do? Of course, he doesn't ring the authorities. He doesn't ring an ambulance thinking, oh my gosh, I've just smacked her over the head. He dismembers her into 12 pieces. Yeah, that's what innocent people do. That would be my first thought, really, Of course it wouldn't. Don't be ridiculous. I just don't understand why people even try and pretend that that's a reasonable thought for a human being to do when they'd accidentally just smacked someone over the head and potentially killed them. Okay. Whatever. So what they did, because her body was really decomposed, they actually did this 3D in-depth scan. And they found that she had been hit on the head about 4 times. So it was estimated that if this rolling pin was the truth that he was saying, that she was potentially hit with that 4 times. They also, another little aspect here as well that I want to just add in is they found all of Julia's body. The only thing that they never found was one of her kidneys. She had one of her kidneys missing, which is strange because why? Just why? These guys were accused of something, but there was not enough evidence to basically substantiate that, and they would never tell anyone why the kidney was gone. It's just strange. What they figured had happened is that he hadn't actually planned on murder that night. He was a demented, deranged human being. He had lots of fantasies about killing women, controlling women, even though he was apparently gay. He had dated women before this, which we will get into. But, Julia seen him sitting alone. She went over chatting to him. She was very drunk, and he sees he was like a opportunist. He sees the opportunity and figured, I can, you know, carry out my fantasies on this woman. She's wasted. She's very trusting, and so she's probably going to come back to my house with me, which she sadly did. She actually wrote her name on a napkin and put that in his pocket, which was later found in his drawers. With, I think her nickname was like Juju, and that's what they found in his drawers later on. And then when it was closing time, they obviously went to the flat. Julia probably would have got a massive shock when she entered it and seen all that stuff. Like a house of horrors, seriously. And then he killed her and dismembered her in the bath by the sounds of, from what I've read. And then they wrapped her body up and disposed of her. Now, something else the 3D scan actually found that I forgot to mention was that the cuts made to dismember her body, some of them were on a looked to be more on a professional level, and others were more of an amateur. And so they figured that this meant that 2 people had cut her body up. You know, Nathan, who had some experience in cutting things like wood cutting or something like that, I can't really remember. And then David, who had no experience with chopping anything. And so that is why they believe that David was also involved in at least the dismembering of her body. Both Nathan Maynard-Ellis and David Leasley were charged with her murder. Now, there were some delays to the trial because of when it happened, obviously COVID and things like that. And like I said, they had tried to plead innocence before that, but when it went to trial, pretty much, Nathan admitted finally to killing Julia. Not only that, it also came forward a woman who had dated Nathan before this. He was 17, she was 15. She came forward to say that he had forced himself upon her. He had often gone out in black clothing with a rope and things like that to look to kidnap and murder someone. He had these fantasies about it all, you know, it was very disturbing stuff, and that accusation was also what he was facing along with the murder of Julia Rawson. So Nathan was convicted of murder. He was also convicted of 4 counts of rape, 1 count of attempted rape, and 1 count of making a threat to kill. There was a separate trial for David because they figured that David must have joined in, at least once the killing had begun or once he had already killed her. And he was also convicted of murder. Both men were sentenced to life in prison with a mandatory sentence. However, Nathan got a minimum of 30 years, plus 14 additional years for the rape charges, whilst David received a minimum of 19. This case was obviously very tragic. My heart absolutely breaks for Julia Rawson and her family and her friends and everyone that's been affected by her case. She was literally 42 years old and she had such a zest for life. And then this cruel, sadistic, evil man took that away from her. And it is just an opportunist as well. Like, she came over and she talked to him in a bar and that was all it took. I am glad that these 2 were kind of dumb with the case because, you know, I don't know, the tattoos, like, they found him not long after because he's walking about shopping, not a care in the world, showing off his tattoos. Well, not showing them off, but, you know, wearing short sleeve tops. He even said when the copper came up to him that if that was him on the footage, he would have cut his hair. Not that he knew that this bar had CCTV, obviously, but most places do nowadays. So it's safe to assume that somewhere does. And so he was just sloppy with everything. Just really easy, I guess, in the sense of the trial and things, to convict them because they were just so dumb and very easily guilty. I'm glad that they were found quickly and that obviously justice has been served for Julia, but my heart still breaks for her loss. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Julia Rawson. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!